What does that mean?
Well, there's been things going on that we don't like, and things going on where they took advantage. And hopefully we'll be fine with Canada. I love Canada. Frankly, Canada should be the 51st state, okay? It really should, because Canada relies entirely on the United States. We don't rely on Canada.
Trump's ambassador to Canada suggested that Canadians are mean and nasty for staying here in our country instead of traveling to the United States.
There has to be a deal that works for Canadians and Canadian workers. And part of the reason why we don't have a deal is that deal is not yet on the table.
Instead of threatening or arguing, Canada allegedly passed 7 strong laws aimed at protecting their national interests and hitting the U.S. economy where it allegedly hurts. These laws target major U.S. industries like tech tourism, food energy, and manufacturing. One law allegedly imposes high taxes on tech giants like Google and Meta, increasing their operating costs in Canada. This allegedly means users in both countries could face higher prices for ads and digital services. Another law advises Canadians to avoid traveling to U.S. states with political instability, gun violence, and poor health care. As a result, tourism from Canada to places like Florida, Texas, and Michigan has allegedly dropped sharply. Florida allegedly saw a 42% decrease, and Minnesota tourism allegedly fell by 31%, hitting local economies hard. Canada also allegedly passed a law banning food imports that don't meet stricter hygiene standards. U.S. meat and produce from states like Iowa and Texas are allegedly being rejected due to pesticide and antibiotic residues. This has disrupted supply chains, lowered prices, and allegedly hurt farmers who now face storage costs and canceled contracts. On the energy front, new licensing rules are allegedly slowing electricity exports from Canada to states like Minnesota, causing power prices to rise. In addition, Canadian tourism in New York City allegedly dropped by 28%, affecting hotels, restaurants, and retail businesses. New hygiene and packaging rules are also delaying exports, like processed foods and electronics. Iowa's agriculture sector is allegedly in crisis. Canada now blocks pork containing banned substances and grains with high chemical residues, allegedly leading to unsold inventory, falling prices, and financial strain on farmers. In Michigan, Canada's automatic tax law allegedly kicked in after the U.S. raised tariffs. Auto part exports were delayed or canceled, allegedly costing companies like Ford and GM over $1.2 billion. The state also allegedly lost millions in tourism revenue. These laws may not be dramatic, but they're deeply effective. The U.S. now faces rising costs, lost jobs, and a weakened global position, especially in agriculture, tech, and energy. And middle-class Americans may feel the pain the most. Once seen as friendly neighbors, 71% of Canadians have allegedly stepped back from the U.S., leaving behind a $1.4 to $4 billion gap and thousands of lost American jobs. While Trump allegedly joked about making Canada the 51st state, Canada allegedly responded quietly but strongly, cutting ties without warning. Cross-border shopping, once a way of life for Canadians, allegedly collapsed in early 2025. Spending at U.S. stores allegedly fell sharply. Traffic at key crossings like Peace Bridge dropped by 12%, and at Rainbow Bridge by 33%. In Erie County, New York, tax revenues allegedly fell by $5 million nearly overnight. Canadian shoppers, who once made up to 70% of weekend sales, allegedly stopped coming. The reasons: the Canadian dollar is weak, travel costs are up, and new U.S. tariffs make American goods more expensive. At the same time, Canadian retailers have improved, giving people fewer reasons to shop across the border. According to a survey, 71% of Canadians now buy fewer U.S. products, and 25% allegedly say they'll never return to old habits. It's a long-term shift. Major retail and souvenir shops are allegedly losing hundreds of millions. Tech and pharmacy sales are down too, as Canadians prefer to shop online. A 10% drop in Canadian tourists could allegedly put 140,000 U.S. jobs at risk and cost $2.1 billion. If the drop reaches 30%, the U.S. could lose up to $6 billion. This has hit low-wage workers, students, and single parents the hardest. Once busy towns now feel empty and forgotten. Meanwhile, Trump's trade war with Canada over dairy has allegedly had disastrous results. He claimed Canada's dairy system was unfair, calling out tariffs as high as 400%. But those tariffs allegedly only apply when U.S. imports go over their quota, which rarely happens. In fact, U.S. dairy exports to Canada made up 40% of their market. After Trump walked away from talks, milk prices in the U.S. allegedly fell, hurting farmers and pushing them into losses. While Trump focused on milk, Canada allegedly struck back with a 3% digital tax on U.S. tech giants like Google and Amazon. But just before the law kicked in, Canada allegedly backed down under pressure, quietly withdrawing the tax, avoiding a fight. Trump allegedly took credit, calling it a win. But while he celebrated, U.S. farmers, car companies, and factories continued to suffer. North America's auto industry depends on cross-border cooperation. Parts are built and moved across states and provinces. But Trump's tariffs allegedly disrupted this. Stellantis reported $5 billion in losses. Ford and GM also faced major hits, and some production was moved from Canada to the U.S., or even to Mexico. Shockingly, the entire trade fight was over just 0.1% of total U.S.-Canada trade, milk. And yet, it allegedly triggered factory shutdowns, lost contracts, and damaged relations. Many Canadian companies are now rethinking ties with the U.S., aiming for safer and more stable trade options elsewhere. Finally, on June 30th, Canada made a big move in energy. Shell's LNG Canada project allegedly shipped its first batch of liquefied natural gas, LNG, to Asia. Unlike U.S. shipments, Canada doesn't need to use the Panama Canal, saving time and money. Until now, Canada relied heavily on the U.S. to sell its gas. But with this first international shipment, that dependence may soon end. The LNG Canada project, led by Shell and other global partners, is Canada's largest energy investment at $40 billion. Currently, it's producing 6.5 million tons of LNG per year, with plans to reach 14 million tons and possibly expand to 28 million tons. That could bring in $8 billion annually. Over 9,000 workers were involved in the project, with billions in contracts awarded to local businesses and Indigenous communities. The biggest advantage? Canada's Pacific coast allows for quicker, cheaper access to Asia, especially Japan, South Korea, and China. Meanwhile, President Trump is allegedly pushing for a U.S. takeover of TikTok, claiming it's about protecting user data from China. He's allegedly backed by billionaire allies, like Oracle's Larry Ellison and investor Frank McCourt, who aim to control or buy the app. If a buyout happens, the app may stay in the U.S., but big changes could follow: ads, censorship, and control over what content trends. However, if ByteDance refuses to sell, TikTok might allegedly be banned from the U.S. after a 90-day deadline, affecting 150 million users, especially creators and small businesses. There's also a third option. Trump could allegedly extend the deadline to keep rare earth mineral deals with China alive. He's unlikely to ruin his own international business wins over one app. But one thing is clear: Trump may be less focused on national security and more on allegedly shifting power and profit toward himself and his allies. What are your thoughts on this? Feel free to share below. Also, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, make sure to do so, as more such videos are on its way.